Hey, would you look at the time? A solid 7 weeks into the season. Perfect timing for an analysis and recommendation video about which shows you should watch. Better late than never, I guess. Since we're going to be going in alphabetical order, let's kick it off with A Million Lives. Now, having your first spoken line be an edgy, tough guy, I like to be alone, it's a terrible first impression. The opening is basically full of reference poses in 3D CG, and so far it seems like a fairly generic isekai. That said, I have to give it credit for a clever, very subtle bit of character foreshadowing within the very first episode that I actually completely missed. I can see this being decently mediocre filler, but it lacks any real enjoyment factor so far. A3 Season Autumn and Winter, the second season of a mobile game adaptation, and from the start it's pretty obvious that this show is for fans of Bishonen and probably yaoi. The question is whether or not the framework of the show is enjoyable beneath that. So far, it doesn't particularly stand out to me as anything beyond average in every department, certainly not worth the investment of watching the entire first season. On the flip side of that spectrum, we have a shoujo-ai slice of life focusing on two schoolgirls who apparently come to school but just skip classes without the teachers ever doing anything about it. On a purely technical level, it surpasses A3 in every single way. The sound design in particular stood out to me. There's decent chemistry and it feels more along the lines of Bloom Into You rather than something like Citrus. AKUDAMA Drive's neon and grime aesthetic might serve as a way to sate those attic-tier Cyberpunk 2077 cravings. The setting is clearly done by somebody who appreciates the genre and understands the differences between modern and cyberpunk settings need to make sense, not just look the part. Within the first few minutes we have not just cars and trains, but waterway trolleys and aerial blimp stations, conveying a sense of transportation expansion to support excessive population density. All without saying a word. I could literally go on forever about all the fantastic details, but I will keep it short and just say keep an eye on this show, and dude, these transitions are so fucking good! In the near future, humanity is under attack by X. Humanity fights back with the anti-X thing Y, and Y is only usable by teenage girls for some contrived reason. Yeah, it's one of those cookie-cutter template concepts. It's full of a bunch of generic characters, standard fight scenes, unnecessary word replacements like Schützengle, which I believe is German for scissoring. Oh yeah, did I mention this show is actually kind of gay too? Jokes aside, this one is completely generic and not really worth your time. The animations in D4DJ have about as many frames as the title has characters. This entire thing just looks and feels uncomfortably lazy, and in the first episode we're treated to a 40-second same episode flashback before we even reach the halfway point. The main character is brain dead and annoying, nothing of value here, moving on. Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai seems like it will be a solid long-running shonen with all the accompanying implications. It's what I would consider a great Saturday morning cartoon, definitely polished with some flashy animation. Fortunately, you won't need to have played any of the games to enjoy the show, as it's based on the Dragon Quest manga of the same name. Hey kid, you like feet, don't you? Yeah, I bet you do. And by the end of this show, we're gonna make sure of it. Setting aside the shift in fan service focus, the show seems to be moving in a bit of a more mature direction. Characters are actually saying things that make sense, and they're clearly trying to add a bit of weight to the show that most of the previous seasons lacked. GOCHULMON wa USAGI desu ka is a simple, cute slice of life show that you can more or less jump into at any point, so it doesn't really matter if you haven't seen the previous seasons. If you need a daily dose of sugar from cute girls doing cute things, then you really can't go wrong with this one. In contrast to that, we have Season 2 of Golden Kamuy. This is a story-driven show with a central quest, so you really need to have seen the previous 2 seasons to not feel completely lost. The aesthetics and humor are pretty good, not gonna lie, and I can comfortably recommend taking 2 evenings to binge the previous seasons in order to watch this one. Advancing further into the oh god what season is this realm, we have HYPNOSIS, Season 6. Look, by now you're either fully invested or you're not interested at all, so there's really nothing for me to say. HANYOU is a pleasant surprise. It is not a stellar show or some kind of masterpiece destined to revive Inuyasha, it just feels like a continuation of the show that could have started airing as soon as the original ended. In other words, it feels like the same show. The characters, visuals, fight pacing, for better or worse, have a level of quality consistent with the original Inuyasha. The best part is that you don't really need to have watched the original to enjoy it, as a brief minute summary is more than sufficient. Higurashi is a classic, well-known franchise and a staple of horror anime. This entry is sort of an alternate version, sequel, hybrid thing. Look, the original creator said that you don't need to have seen any of the previous material to enjoy this, so just think of it as an alternate timeline sort of deal. Be warned though, there are definitely going to be some bits and pieces that will spoil you if you really intend to go watch the original. So you either watch the original and be spoiled for this, or watch this and be spoiled for the original. Pick your poison. Visually, the show is fairly clean, as the character design was handled by Watame Akio, who worked on the original as a keyframe artist. So characters tend to have a look closer to the likes of Grisaya and the Monogatari series rather than the style of the original show. Whether you like this change is going to be up to personal preference and probably your familiarity with the series. Hypnosis Mike is hilariously stupid and as ridiculous as its synopsis would lead you to believe. A true so bad it's good anime from start to finish, and to top it off, there are some legitimately good gags sprinkled in. It is 100% a bad show, but might be one of the best things to watch with buddies at 3 AM. A dude literally holds a restaurant hostage with a bomb vest made of illegal microphones. I know the source material came out first, but this is straight up a less exciting Durarara. I can see it picking up the pacing and stakes, but for now it's relatively boring and not worth watching. Look, I'm a simple man. I see fit chicks and it's on my list. It's certainly no keijo, it's a much more standard girls sports anime. Frankly, I'll admit that it's an average show, so if you're looking for more story-driven and engaging shows to watch, you'll want to look elsewhere. If you just want to see cute girls and learn a bit about competitive climbing, then this is your show. Also, the main girl activates her gamer mode puzzle brain, and it's hilarious. Within the first 2 episodes, you can already tell that Jujutsu Kaisen is probably going to be the standout action show of the season, much like Demon Slayer, Attack on Titan, etc. The plot is pretty standard, but the animation and comedy are on point. There is also a fair amount of coyly calling itself out on dumb anime stuff, like a high schooler casually smashing the shot put world record, so if that makes you chuckle, you're in luck. Next up, we have By the Grace of the Gods, a slime isekai that actually almost makes me miss reincarnated as a slime. This show is horrendously low quality, backgrounds and character models feel like they're from completely different shows, the animation barely qualifies as animation, the character designs are generic, this is an easy skip, not worth your time. I was going to make a joke about how every show that starts with K this season was mediocre, but this one goddamn anime ruined it. Good visuals and fantastic humor, the characters thus far have great chemistry, and it should turn out to be a solidly above average show, although I can definitely sense the sad feels coming. After all, this is a show by Maeda Jun, the guy behind Angel Beats, Charlotte, and Clannad. Kimi to Boku is the typical anime Romeo and Juliet plotline with more magic and guns and stuff. At least when the main characters aren't just awkwardly interacting at restaurants, theaters, and art exhibits. The boy is dull, self-insert fodder, and the girl is a generic tsundere. I am pretty sure this is supposed to be an action romance, but it is seriously lacking in spectacle so far. King's Raid is a generic fantasy show with a chosen one and generic baddies. Fight choreography and character designs are mediocre, and the 3rd episode is literally one big exposition dump. Skip this. Kuma Kuma is another generic VR MMO RPG isekai with an OP QT girl. Given how I feel about shows like Bofuri, it's obvious that I would think this is Garbo. Generic concept, mediocre characters, inconsistent animation, she's too OP for any excitement or tension, and it's just not funny to enjoy as a comedy. There's no redeeming qualities here, skip it. In all honesty, I don't think I've ever watched a single idle anime, mainly because I never found the concept very interesting. But after the very first performance in episode 1, I started wondering if maybe I should have given this genre a chance. Setting aside the musical numbers, the plot, characters, and visuals seem solid enough, maybe a bit above average. Ultimately, your enjoyment of the show will come down to your enjoyment of the genre itself. Maisetsu, a show about stand-up comedy, so naturally the majority of the first episode focused on a single joke that wasn't funny. The second episode had exactly one slightly funny skit, so either I'm the world's biggest smooth brain or this show is just boring and not worth watching. If you're looking for a better alternative, just watch Joshiraku. Magatsu Zurst. The opening scenes are an example of good directorial decisions, mainly regarding the establishment of scale and location, although I personally would have put the aerial shot before the water view one. There is proper execution of exposition in the form of a formal diet proposal, in other words, reasonable exposition. While it's visually clunky and lacking any real standout characters, it has the potential to go either way in terms of story quality. Definitely not the worst start of the season, but it will need more time to develop to know for sure. Mahoka Season 2, it is time for the literal second coming of anime Jesus Onisama. The show is absolutely a so bad it's good show, although with less comedic value than Hypnosis Mike, whose characters and executions are so god-awful that yo, is that some Christmas stolen? I can respect it. Wait, what the fuck is this music? Majo no Tabi Tabi honestly might be one of the most solid shows of the entire season. Solid visuals, decent characters, and a promising premise. Episodic travel shows without a focused overarching plotline like Kino's Journey are usually solid as long as they remain consistently engaging. Also, can we talk about how literally every witch is a hot MILF?
This pleases me.
Sleepy Princess. I actually read this manga a while ago and I thought it was cute and a decently funny concept. I'm actually glad to see they managed to meet and even exceed my expectations. Not only is it generally well executed, they assembled quite the cast of all-star voice talent, which honestly surprised me. I'd consider this an easy should-watch recommendation. Talentless Nana is Among Us, the anime. Enjoyment isn't great, as the killer is pretty clever for one kill and then retarded for the next. I mean, imagine killing somebody and sticking around the scene of the crime. The side characters are all cardboard cutouts, and frankly, this show doesn't seem entertaining enough to be worth the time invested into watching it. Alright, bear with me. We start off playing Dance Dance Revolution in South America with some random mercenaries. Then skip to normal kids going to a school run by a vampire and Frankenstein guarded by anime Wolverine. This is a universe where people stand on rooftops like a couple of chuny weirdos in full view of everybody and are only slightly suspicious when a random albino manlet demands to be let in through the school gates. None of this is played as comedy. By the end of the second episode, I still had no clue what the hell this show is even about, and apparently this vampire guy is the main focus, but he has so little presence that I legitimately keep forgetting that he exists. I saw the synopsis of Fruit Tart and expected a generic idol show, but this is really more of a slice of life comedy, and unlike other shows this season, it's actually fairly funny. Cute characters, good comedic pacing, and Yoko Hikasa doing what she does best. I wouldn't call this a must-watch, but it's not a terrible use of your time. In case you're not already familiar with Osomatsu, it's a solid comedy with Showa-era character designs, memorable characters, solid gags, and a decent amount of reference-based humor. I'd recommend having watched the previous seasons, but you can really jump in at any point. Oh my god, how do you even pronounce this? Senyoku. Remember how I said Magatsu made good directorial decisions regarding establishing location and scale? Senyoku does the opposite. There is a section of the first episode in which a transport aircraft is flying from Europe to Japan and is ambushed by a baddie. They receive reinforcements from behind that we later find out came from Japan, which is in the complete opposite direction. Character traits are all delivered to us verbally by other other characters, there are same episode flashbacks, nothing is explained properly, the entire show is mediocre cookie cutter stuff and it's not worth watching. The good news is that you don't need to watch all the previous entries of Strike Witches to understand this one. The bad news is that frankly you won't want to watch it anyways. The same cookie cutter X appears and only shoujo's confided plot that we've seen multiple times this season alone, unfulfilling panty shots, and one of the dumbest design decisions I've ever seen. It is beyond salvageable and should be skipped. Honestly, I'm not sure what to say about Samurai, a show about gymnasts. Conceptually and visually it's not bad, and there's nothing about this show that is distinctly garbage, but I just find it very boring and it doesn't feel like it has much substance or emotional investment. Definitely the kind of show you'll forget to keep watching. I do like the funny bird though. Yes, another piece of Japanese government marriage propaganda, except this time it's actually pretty decent. Funnily enough, the top waifu of the season might be a literal waifu. There is nothing about the show that really grabs you, but it's a perfectly fine bit of entertainment each week. My only major complaint is the lackluster songs and the seizure-inducing opening visuals. Tsukiyuta is just generic male idol stuff, lower quality than Hypnosis Mic, and nowhere near as memorable or entertaining. Unless you're obsessed with male idols, this one is an easy skip. Alright, last show. Yukoku no Moriarty is an excellent concept, good execution with respectable red herrings, although there was a continuity error or two. The opening absolutely smacks though, it might be one of my favorites of the whole season, absolutely a must watch.